I am Captain Nora Watts, 33 years old, serving in the United States Army. My younger brother Caleb and I have always been close, navigating our parents' divorce and building our lives together. So, when he was getting married, I didn't hesitate to pay my entire life savings, $65,000, for my brother's dream wedding at the most luxurious venue, money earned with sweat and blood during my years of service in war zones. But then last week, their wedding planner called. With a cold voice, she informed me that the presence of a soldier was not suitable for the event, so I had been removed from the guest list. And yes, they still decided to keep my $65,000. If you are watching this video, let me know where you are watching from. Like and follow, because this is the story of how a soldier fights for the most important battle of her life, to reclaim her self-respect. The house was quiet, the kind of deep, settled quiet that only comes with a Saturday afternoon in a small Texas town. Sunlight cut dusty stripes through the living room blinds. I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of my father's life, packed away in a worn wooden footlocker. His dog tags, cool and smooth in my palm. A faded photo of him in his dress uniform, looking impossibly young. A folded American flag. I was sorting, organizing, remembering. This was my history, a legacy of service passed from a father to a daughter. My life, my career as a captain, was built on the foundation of the honor contained in this box. That's when my phone buzzed on the floor beside me. The screen lit up with an unknown number, area code 401, Rhode Island, Newport. I almost ignored it, but a flicker of instinct, the same one that tells you to check your six in a dark alley, made me answer. "This is Nora Watts." "Captain Watts," a woman's voice replied. It was crisp, cool, and carried the detached efficiency of a surgeon about to deliver bad news. "This is Isadora Finch, calling on behalf of the Vance family regarding the Watts-Vance wedding." "Isadora, right. The planner. Is everything okay?" I asked, my mind still half on a letter my dad had written from basic training. "Everything is proceeding as scheduled," she said, her tone as flat as a pressed sheet. "There is, however, a small adjustment to the guest list that requires your attention. We are, of course, terribly sorry for any inconvenience this may cause." I sat up straighter. A knot of coldness began to form in my stomach. An adjustment? What kind of adjustment? There was a slight pause, the sound of a page turning, perhaps. "After careful consideration of the event's overall tone and visual narrative," she began, the words sounding rehearsed, sanitized, "the Vance family has concluded that your attendance is no longer requested." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. The words didn't compute. It was like hearing a sentence in a foreign language. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice low. "I think I misheard you." "The decision has been made, Captain," Isadora said, with a hint of impatience now, as if I were a slow child. "The Vances are curating a very specific atmosphere, a romantic, classic New England affair. They feel that the presence of a military officer in any capacity introduces a somewhat aggressive brand aesthetic that doesn't align with their vision." Aggressive. The word hit me like a physical blow. Not unwelcome, not inappropriate. Aggressive. My uniform, the flag in this box, the years of service, the deployments, the sacrifices, all of it reduced to a marketing term. A brand. And it was the wrong brand for their party. My training kicked in. Assess the threat, don't react to it. My voice, when I finally used it, was devoid of any emotion. "I understand. Thank you for the update, Ms. Finch." I ended the call before she could offer any more corporate-approved apologies. My first move was to call Caleb, my brother, the reason for this whole mess. The phone rang, and rang, and rang, before finally clicking over to his cheerful, recorded voicemail. I hung up without leaving a message and immediately typed out a text. "Call me. Now." The three dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. He was typing. Then he stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs. After what felt like an eternity, a block of text appeared. It was long, too long. The kind of long that's full of excuses before you even read the words. Hey sis, I'm so sorry, it's all so complicated. Serafina's mom is just. She's very particular about optics and appearances. You know how these old money families are. I didn't want to make waves. I'm really caught in the middle here. I read the message twice, the words blurring together. He wasn't defending me. He wasn't outraged. He was managing me, handling the situation. The knot in my stomach tightened into a block of ice. I scrolled down, and there it was. The final casual twist of the knife. We'll celebrate separately later, okay? Just you and me. Like old times. Like old times. Before he'd been absorbed into this world of manicured lawns and fake smiles. Before he'd decided his sister, his protector, was a social liability. That little phrase wasn't an olive branch. It was a confirmation. It was his way of saying, yes, you've been pushed out, and I'm okay with it. Now please, be quiet about it. My fingers felt numb as I typed my reply. 1 sentence, 7 words. What about my $65,000? I sent it and set the phone face down on the floor. I didn't want to see the 3 dots. I didn't want to watch him formulate another lie. I just stared at the footlocker. I counted the seconds. 1 minute passed, then 5. The silence in the room grew heavy, thick with betrayal. It pressed down on me, suffocating me. For 10 minutes, there was nothing. 10 minutes where I imagined him showing my text to his fiancée, them composing the perfect, dismissive response together. The phone buzzed. I flipped it over. They said it's your contribution to my happiness. They're very grateful. Grateful. The word hung in the air, obscene. They weren't returning the money. My life savings, the hazard pay from Kandahar, the sleepless nights in Baghdad, the years I'd spent eating MREs so he could have the wedding of his dreams. It was a contribution, a gift, and they were grateful. It was a transaction, and my side was paid in full. I was dismissed. Something inside me snapped, not with a shout, but with a quiet, terrifying click. The pain was gone, the shock was gone. In their place was a cold, clear calm. It was the same feeling I got right before a mission, when the objective is clear and the stakes are life and death. I stood up and walked to the full-length mirror by the door. I looked at myself. My eyes were dark, steady. There were no tears. I didn't see a heartbroken sister. I didn't see a victim. I saw Captain Nora Watts of the United States Army. And on the hook beside the mirror hung my dress uniform. The sharp creases and polished brass a silent testament to an oath I had sworn to uphold. An oath to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They thought this was over. They thought they could take my money, my honor, my place in my own family, and dismiss me with a thank you note written by my own brother. They thought they could write me off like a settled account, but they don't know. This debt of honor, they're about to pay it back in full. With interest. That debt of honor, standing there in the quiet of my living room, the cold fury of the present began to recede, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. I wondered when that debt had truly begun. It wasn't with the 65,000 tolls. No, it was forged long before that, under the vast, star-dusted canopy of a Texas sky. It was a debt born from a promise made by a 12-year-old girl trying to be a fortress for her 10-year-old brother. My mind drifted back, the night our parents left. One by one, they had packed their bags and driven away, leaving behind 2 kids in a house that suddenly felt cavernous and cold. The electricity was the first thing to go. The unpaid bill, a final casualty of their war. I found Caleb huddled in the living room, wrapped in a single wool blanket, shivering more from fear than the autumn chill. I remember my hands shaking as I gathered dry twigs and old newspapers in the backyard, building a small sputtering fire in the center of our rusty barbecue pit. It wasn't much, but it pushed back the darkness. I sat beside Caleb, pulling the thin blanket around both of us. The only food we had left was a single piece of cold cornbread. I broke it in half, then looked at his small, pale face and pushed my piece into his hand. He looked up at me, his eyes wide in the flickering firelight. Are they coming back? He whispered. I didn't have an answer, so instead I made a promise. I wrapped my arm around his trembling shoulders and pulled him close. It doesn't matter, I said, my voice trying for a strength I didn't feel. As long as I'm here, nothing's gonna happen to you. I promise. That promise became my mission. It was the bedrock of my entire life. Years later, on another cool Texas night, we were sitting on the tailgate of our grandfather's beat-up Ford pickup, staring up at that same star-filled sky. I pointed to a cluster of bright stars. See that? I said. That's Orion, the hunter. He's a warrior, Caleb. He'll always be up there, watching over us. He believed me, and in that moment, I wasn't just his sister, I was his warrior, his Orion. That feeling, that duty, carried me through high school. While other kids were at parties, I was working the late shift at a local BBQ joint, the smell of smoked brisket clinging to my clothes. I remember the year Caleb made the high school football team. In Texas, Friday night lights are a religion, and he was a star running back. But he was tearing up his cheap cleats. He needed a good pair, a pair of Nikes he'd circled in a catalog. But there was no money. So I picked up extra shifts, double shifts. For 2 months, I came home long after midnight, exhausted, my arms crisscrossed with small faint burns from the grease traps and the grill. I hid them under long sleeves. I never told him. I just saved every dollar, every tip, until I could walk into the sporting goods store and slap that cash down on the counter. The look on his face when I gave him that box. It was like handing him the moon. And the first time he scored a touchdown in those new shoes, the crowd roaring, he ran straight off the field, helmet still on, and threw his sweaty arms around me where I stood by the chain-link fence. That hug, that pure, unfiltered gratitude was worth every sleepless night, every burn. It was a payment on the debt I owed him, the promise I'd made. The roles were set. I was the provider, the protector. He was the one to be proud of. When I enlisted, boot camp nearly broke me. The screaming, the endless running, the exhaustion that went bone deep. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. The one thing that got me through was a letter from Caleb. It wasn't from our parents. It was from him. The paper was smudged, his handwriting a familiar scrawl. He wrote about how he'd told all his friends his sister was becoming a soldier. He told them I was tougher than any guy on the football team. And at the end, he wrote 6 words that I read until the paper grew soft and threatened to tear. You're my hero, Nora. That letter was my shield. It was my reason. My hero status was confirmed. But now, sitting in my quiet house, I realized heroes can be discarded. The first crack in that foundation appeared about a year ago. It was subtle, easy to ignore. Caleb brought Serafina home to Texas for the first time. I took them to a local diner, a place with checkered tablecloths and the best chicken fried steak in the county. Serafina wrinkled her nose the moment we walked in. She picked at the menu with a manicured finger and asked the waitress, with a look of faint disgust, if they had any gluten-free options. Caleb didn't defend the place we'd grown up loving. He didn't gently tease her for her city ways. He shifted uncomfortably in the booth and apologized. To her. Sorry, he'd mumbled. It's a little rustic. Rustic. It was a small thing, a tiny betrayal of who we were and where we came from. I brushed it off. I told myself he was just in love, trying to impress her, trying to bridge the gap between his world and hers. But now I know what it really was. It wasn't a bridge. It was a surrender. The first of many. My father, a man of few words, once told me something I never forgot. Family aren't the people you share blood with, Nora, he'd said. They're the people who'll bleed for you. Looking back, I'd been bleeding for Caleb my whole life. The tragedy wasn't that he had finally stopped noticing. It was that he had handed the knife to someone else. That promise to be Caleb's warrior, his Orion, was what led me to the recruiter's office a week after I graduated high school. The Army wasn't an escape. It was a path, a way to build a life solid enough to support 2 people, a way to ensure Caleb would never have to know the kind of cold or hunger we felt that night by the fire. He was going to have every opportunity I didn't. That became my why. And as the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl once wrote in a book I've carried with me on every deployment, he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. My how was built on discipline and sacrifice. From my first day in the service, I started saving. It began with the decision to live a life stripped to the essentials. While other soldiers in my barracks would head to the PX, the post-exchange, on payday to buy the latest headphones or a new video game, I'd grab a free coffee from the mess hall and find a quiet corner with a book. I watched them, not with envy, but with a quiet focus. Every dollar I didn't spend on myself was a dollar that could go into the high-yield savings account I'd opened. When I was deployed to Iraq and later Afghanistan, the deposits grew larger. The hazard pay, the combat pay. It all went straight into that account. It became a ritual. A transfer of funds that felt like a transfer of security, a long-distance fulfillment of my promise. My comrades would sometimes tease me. "Watts, you ever gonna live a little?" they'd ask. I'd just smile. They didn't understand. This wasn't about depriving myself. It was about providing. The reason was simple, always the same, in case Caleb needs it. The true cost of that savings account isn't measured in dollars, though. It's measured in moments. The clearest one, the one that seared into my memory, was a Christmas Eve in Kandahar. It was cold, the kind of biting, dusty cold that gets into your bones. We were trying to make it feel like a holiday. Someone had strung up some cheap lights in the bunker, and we were about to dig into a special Christmas dinner, turkey, allegedly, when the sirens wailed. That high, piercing scream that means only one thing. Incoming. Instinct takes over. You don't think, you move. We scrambled, diving for cover as the ground shuddered. The dinner was forgotten. When the all-clear finally sounded, the festive mood was shattered. We emerged into the quiet aftermath, the air thick with the smell of dust and cordite. I found a spot in the corner of the bunker, away from the others, and pulled out my dinner, a standard MRE, meal, ready to eat. I tore open the brown plastic pouch. The main course was cold. It always is. Just as I was about to take the first joyless bite, my phone buzzed. It was a new email. From Caleb. I opened it, a small smile on my face, eager for a connection to home. The screen lit up with a photo. It was him and Serafina. They were in a restaurant in New York City. A massive, glittering Christmas tree stood behind them. He was wearing an expensive-looking suit, a perfect smile on his face. She was beside him, radiant, a diamond necklace sparkling at her throat. They were raising champagne glasses, their faces glowing with warmth and happiness. I looked at the picture on my phone. Then I looked down at the gray, congealed food in my lap. I looked at their world of warmth and laughter, and then at my world of concrete and sirens. It wasn't jealousy I felt. Not exactly. It was a profound, hollowing sense of distance. A realization that while I was living the how, he was living a why. I couldn't even comprehend anymore. I was funding a world I wasn't a part of. And that's the thing they don't understand. That $65,000 isn't just money. It's the price of 100 sleepless nights with the sound of distant gunfire as my lullaby. It's the ache of homesickness that hits you so hard it feels like a physical blow. It's the weight of command, the heavy, suffocating guilt when one of your soldiers gets hurt on a patrol you planned, a scar you carry on the inside forever. That money is the currency of my youth, traded for security for him. For them to treat it like a casual donation, like it was nothing, is to say that my sacrifices were nothing. That my life, my service, was nothing. If you've ever given a piece of yourself for someone you love, your time, your energy, your hard-earned money, and felt taken for granted, please support this story with a like. And in the comments, just write the words, "I know that feeling." Because your validation is a reminder that we're not alone in these silent battles. That feeling, that chasm between our worlds, was on my mind when I found myself back stateside, standing in the chow line at Fort Hood. The sounds and smells were familiar, comforting in their routine. I slid my tray along the metal rail, getting the standard soldier's dinner. A piece of baked chicken, a scoop of mashed potatoes, and a spoonful of green beans. Simple, functional. Earned. I sat down at an empty table and stared at my plate. And then I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a low, bitter chuckle. Because I suddenly remembered the wedding menu Caleb had excitedly shown me months ago, the one I was paying for. Maine lobster, beef Wellington, free-flowing vintage champagne. A feast fit for royalty, paid for by a soldier's rations. I took a bite of my chicken. It tasted like ashes. Let's see, I thought to myself, a cold smile touching my lips. If they can stomach a feast built on a lie. That question, could they stomach a feast built on a lie, stayed with me long after I'd scraped my tray and left the mess hall. It echoed in the empty space of my barracks room, a sterile box with cinder block walls painted a drab, institutional beige. The silence in that room had become a heavy thing, a physical presence that pressed in on me. After years of sharing the noisy, chaotic quarters of enlisted life, the solitude of my own space as an officer was something I usually cherished. But now, it just felt like loneliness. I sat on the edge of my neatly made bed, the silence amplifying the feeling of being utterly, completely cut off from the one person I thought would always be in my corner. A sudden, sharp rap on the door made me jump, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find Master Sergeant Davis standing there. He was a career soldier, a man whose face was a roadmap of deployments and tough winters, but whose eyes held a surprising gentleness. He'd served under my father years ago, and since I'd been stationed at Fort Hood, he'd taken on the unofficial role of a watchful uncle. He was holding a plastic Tupperware container, the lid slightly fogged with warmth. "Heard you had a rough couple of days, Captain," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that was used to commanding respect without having to be raised. He didn't wait for a reply. He just held out the container. "My wife, she made too much chili. Figured you could use a home-cooked meal." I took the container. The warmth seeped through the plastic into my cold hands. "You didn't have to do that, Sergeant," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "Nonsense," he waved a hand dismissively. "It's Texas style, the way your mother used to make it." He knew. He was probably the only person on this base who knew the bare bones of my family situation. I popped the lid, and the rich, spicy aroma of tomatoes, beef, and cumin filled the room. It was the smell of my childhood, of standing on a stool in a warm kitchen, watching my mother stir a giant pot. For the first time since that phone call, the tight knot of ice in my chest began to melt, and I had to fight back the sudden, sharp sting of tears. It was just a bowl of chili, but it felt like a lifeline. He didn't pry or ask for details. He just seemed to understand. He leaned against the doorframe, his presence filling the small room with a quiet strength. "Your father was a good man, Nora," he said, calling me by my first name, something he only did when we were alone. He lived by a code. I remember one time during a training exercise, a real mud-soaked nightmare. A young private made a mistake that could have failed the whole platoon. Your dad took the heat for it. Told the CO it was his miscalculation. He protected his own. Davis looked at me directly. He used to say, "There are things in this world that aren't for sale. Loyalty and self-respect. Don't you let anyone take those from you. Not a soul, not even family." His words weren't pity. They were a reminder, a reinforcement. He was reminding me not of my weakness, but of my inheritance. A legacy of honor passed down from another soldier. He was tapping into the bedrock of who I was, the part of me that the Vances and even Caleb couldn't touch. He saw the captain, not the abandoned sister. "Thank you, Master Sergeant," I managed to say, my voice clearer now. He just gave a short, sharp nod. "You eat that while it's hot," he said. And then he was gone, leaving the scent of home behind. A few days later, another small moment broke through the gloom. One of my junior soldiers, Specialist Evans, a bright young woman from Ohio, got word of a family emergency back home. Her mother was sick and in the hospital. The red tape to get emergency leave can be a nightmare. a slow-moving beast of paperwork, signatures, and approvals from people who have never met you. I saw the raw panic in her eyes, the feeling of helplessness. So I spent my afternoon on the phone, navigating the bureaucracy, walking the paperwork from one office to the next myself until I got the final signature from the battalion commander. She was on a bus home by that evening. She didn't say much before she left, just a quick, formal, "Thank you, Captain." But the next morning, when I got to my office, there was something on my desk. It was a single Hershey's bar, the one with almonds, my favorite, and a small folded note. In neat, careful handwriting, it said, "Thanks for looking out for us, ma'am. Thanks for looking out for us." I held that small piece of chocolate in my hand, and it felt heavier than gold. Here, in this world of rules and ranks, of dirt and discipline, my care was seen. It was acknowledged. It was valued. It was a simple, profound truth. This was my family now. This was my tribe. The soldier's creed, the oath we all take, says, "I will never leave a fallen comrade." It wasn't just a string of words to be memorized. The men and women I served with lived that creed every single day in gestures big and small. Caleb had broken the unwritten creed of family without a second thought. Later that evening, I sat alone in my room, finishing the last of Sergeant Davis's chili. It tasted like home. It tasted like strength. And as I ate, I thought about that question again, the one that had been haunting me. Could they stomach a feast built on a lie? I had my answer now. Yes, they would. They would feast on their Maine lobster and their beef Wellington, and they would toast with their vintage champagne, and they wouldn't taste the slightest hint of bitterness. People like them, people who have never had to earn anything, who have never sacrificed anything, have no concept of the true flavor of things. They don't know the taste of sacrifice, so they can't taste the poison of betrayal. Their palates are numb to the cost of their own comfort. But I do. I know the cost of every single bite they plan to take. I know the sleepless nights, the lonely holidays, the moments of gut-wrenching fear that paid for their celebration, and I would not let them enjoy that meal in peace. My resolve, which had been shaken, now hardened into something cold and clear as steel. The mission was no longer just about getting my money back. It was about honor. The resolve I'd found in the mess hall was a cold comfort over the next few days. It was a hard, protective shell, but underneath it, a raw sense of betrayal still festered. I threw myself into my work, focusing on troop readiness reports and training schedules, anything to keep my mind occupied. I was in my office, reviewing supply chain logistics, when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Caleb. I stared at it for a long moment, my first instinct to just let it go to voicemail. But then, a treacherous sliver of hope worked its way through my defenses. It was the hope of the 12-year-old girl who had promised to protect him, the 16-year-old who had worked extra shifts for him, the soldier who had saved for him. Maybe he realized. Maybe he's calling to make it right. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Nora." His voice was hesitant, strained. "Hey." "Caleb," I said, my tone flat, offering nothing. "Listen, We've been thinking, and we feel terrible about how everything went down. We want to talk, all of us." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "Please, Nora," he pleaded. "Just a video call? 5 minutes. For me." That old familiar pull. For me. The 2 words he had used his entire life to get what he wanted. A part of me, the captain, knew it was a tactical error to engage. But the sister, the weary, hopeful sister, agreed. "Fine. 5 minutes." When the video call connected, my screen was filled with Caleb's anxious face. Then he shifted, and Serafina slid into the frame beside him, a vision of curated perfection. She was wearing a cream-colored silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly food budget. Her hair was immaculate, her makeup flawless, and her smile was a brilliant, blinding white. "Nora, darling," she began, her voice dripping with the kind of practiced sweetness that sets your teeth on edge. We just feel absolutely dreadful about this entire misunderstanding. My mother, you know how she is. So terribly traditional. It was never our intention to cause any hurt. The apology was as hollow as a drum. She expertly deflected all blame onto her mother, framing herself and Caleb as innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire of old-fashioned sensibilities. I remained silent, my face a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. I'd faced down more intimidating threats in rooms with far higher stakes than this. My silence seemed to unnerve her. She pushed on, her smile never wavering. And to show our deepest gratitude for your incredible generosity, we wanted to give you a small token of our appreciation. She leaned out of the frame for a second and then came back, holding a small square box in her hand. It was the unmistakable, iconic robin's egg blue of Tiffany & Co. It's a bracelet, she cooed, holding it up to the camera as if presenting a crown jewel. It's from their new collection. We just hope that whenever you look at it, you'll think of us and our special day and know how much your contribution means to us. I stared at the blue box. The air left my lungs in a slow, silent rush. The audacity of it was breathtaking. They weren't returning my money. They were using a fraction of my own money to buy me a trinket, a bauble intended to placate me, to buy my silence. They were putting a price tag on my honor, and they thought it was worth the cost of a silver bracelet. It was the most profound insult I had ever received, delivered with a perfect, condescending smile. I said nothing. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Caleb, seeing my lack of response, rushed to fill the void. His face was a mask of pleading desperation. See, Nora, they really do appreciate you. Their way of showing it is just different. It's a beautiful gesture. Please, just accept it. For me. Let's not make this any more stressful than it already is. And there it was. The final, crushing blow. He wasn't just a bystander. He was an active participant in this charade. In his eyes, I was the one making things stressful. I was the one creating the problem by not gracefully accepting their insulting peace offering. He was gaslighting me, trying to twist reality until I was the villain of the story. The ungrateful sister who just couldn't appreciate a beautiful gesture. A quote from General Patton, a man not known for his subtlety, flashed through my mind. If you're going through hell, keep going. This was my own private hell, a battlefield of manipulation and false sentiment, and the only way out was straight through. My focus sharpened, the hurt receded, replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. I looked past Serafina's polished facade, my eyes locking directly onto my brother's through the screen. When I spoke, my voice was low, steady, and devoid of all emotion. You have two options, Caleb, I said, speaking to him as if he were the only one in the room. Option 1, you tell them to wire the full $65,000 back into my account by the end of the day. Option 2, you and I have nothing more to say to each other, ever. You don't have to answer me right now. I then shifted my gaze for the first and only time to Serafina. Her perfect smile had finally faltered, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. I gave her a look that could cut steel. And you, Serafina, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, but each word precise and lethal. Keep your bracelet. My honor isn't that cheap. I clicked the red end call button before either of them could respond, plunging my room back into a blessed, empowering silence. The silence that followed the disconnected video call was a weapon in itself. It was cold, sharp, and absolute. For a few days, I allowed that silence to be my shield, a wall I built around myself. I didn't reach out to Caleb. He didn't reach out to me. The ultimatum I had given hung in the dead air between us, a line drawn in the sand. A part of me, the part that still remembered the little boy I'd protected, expected a call of surrender, an apology, anything. But the silence held. It was a quiet Tuesday evening. I was off duty, scrolling mindlessly through my social media feed, a numbing distraction from the storm raging inside me. Then I saw it. It was a post from Serafina. My thumb froze over the screen. The photo was professionally lit, perfectly staged. Serafina was posed in what looked like the sitting room of a mansion, a smug, serene smile on her face. Her hand was delicately placed on her chest, drawing the eye to the single piece of jewelry she wore against her expensive silk blouse. It was a necklace, a delicate single strand of pearls with a small antique pearl clasp. My mother's pearls. My breath caught in my throat. It felt like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that knocked all the air out of me. It was the only thing of value she had left me, the one tangible piece of her I had left in the world. I'd lent it to Caleb for Serafina to wear on their wedding day, only on the wedding day, as a symbol of my blessing, a fragile olive branch extended across a widening chasm. I never agreed to give it to her. I never imagined she would claim it as her own. Then I read the caption. The words burned themselves into my memory. So honored to wear the Watts family heirloom, a beautiful piece from my late mother-in-law-to-be, feeling so welcomed into the family. Family, heirloom? Blessed. The hashtags felt like a slap in the face. Blessed. The sheer, unadulterated gall of it sent a surge of white-hot rage through me, so intense it made my vision swim. She hadn't just taken the necklace. She had stolen my mother's memory, twisted it into a prop for her public performance of perfection, and rebranded it as her own inheritance. The days of the past few weeks shattered. This was no longer a passive hurt, it was an active desecration. I snatched my phone, my fingers fumbling as I dialed Caleb's number. This time, he answered on the first ring. Nora, I was just about to… Mom's necklace. I cut him off, my voice dangerously low. Why is it on her neck in a public post for the entire world to see? There was a moment of panicked silence on his end, then a stammer. Oh, that. Look, it's complicated. Uncomplicate it for me, Caleb. Now. He sighed, a sound of pure exasperation, as if I were the one being unreasonable. Genevieve. Serafina's mother. She said that a simple string of pearls wasn't befitting of a civil servant like you. She said it belonged with the future daughter of the family, someone who would know how to appreciate it properly. A civil servant. A government worker. The words were meant to diminish me, to reduce my years of service, my rank, my sacrifices, into something common, something less than them. And you let her? I whispered, the rage now morphing into a terrifying cold clarity. You just agreed? What was I supposed to do, Nora? He shot back, his voice rising in panicked self-defense. Start a war with my future mother-in-law over a necklace? The final dam broke. It wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't about the wedding invitation. It was about the casual, cruel dismissal of our mother's memory, of my entire life's work. And my brother, my little brother, had stood by and handed our history over to them without a fight. Caleb, I said, and my voice was completely calm, completely detached. Listen to me very carefully. You didn't just let them insult me. You let them insult Mom. It's over. I ended the call before he could say another word. The grief, the hurt, the shock. It all evaporated. In its place was something pure and hard as diamond. They had crossed a line that did not exist on any map. I stood up and began to pace the confines of my small room, back and forth like a caged tiger. But I was no longer a victim. The switch had been flipped. I wasn't thinking like a wounded older sister anymore. My mind was clearing, the fog of emotion replaced by the sharp, analytical precision of a military intelligence officer planning a campaign. I stopped in front of the small American flag I kept pinned to my wall. I looked at the stars and stripes, and I thought about the values they represented: liberty, justice, equality. My personal battle suddenly felt like a fight for those very principles. The Declaration of Independence echoed in my mind. That all men are created equal. It wasn't just a line in a history book. It was a promise that a person's worth isn't determined by their bank account or their family name, but by their character and their actions. The Vances believed they were better. Caleb had allowed them to believe it. I was about to prove them wrong. If you've ever had to stand up and fight for a memory, for a principle, or for someone who couldn't fight for themselves, hit the like button to join this mission. And in the comments below, I want you to write one word that describes what honor means to you. Let's create an honor roll right here. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. The screen cast a cool blue light on my face. My thoughts were no longer scattered. They were organized, itemized. Objective 1, reclaim the money. Objective 2, recover the necklace. Objective 3, make them pay for their arrogance. The campaign had its objectives, the firepower I wasn't waiting. The question I'd asked myself wasn't a philosophical one, it was a launch command. The moment the decision was made, the emotional storm inside me subsided, replaced by the cold, clear calm of a mission underway. Grief and anger are luxuries you can't afford on the battlefield. And this was a battlefield. My actions became a sequence, a checklist guided by a principle we live by in the military. The UO-OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. I had observed the threat. I had oriented myself to the new reality. I had decided on a course of action. Now it was time to act. At 0600 the next morning, before the Texas sun had a chance to burn off the morning cool, I made my first call. I didn't scroll through my contacts. I knew the number by heart. "Mike," I said when he picked up, his voice still thick with sleep. "It's Watts." "Nora," he grunted, the sound of a coffee maker gurgling in the background. "What's on fire?" Mike and I went way back to a dusty intelligence post in Bagram. He had the sharpest mind for patterns I'd ever seen. Now he ran a private investigation firm in Austin that did corporate security work. He was the best there was at finding cracks in otherwise perfect facades. "I need a full workup on an Alistair Vance and his financial empire," I said, my voice all business. "No preamble, no small talk. I want to know everything, but focus on current deals, mergers, acquisitions, anything sensitive. I'm looking for leverage, specifically anything where public image is a critical vulnerability." There was a pause on the other end, then a low whistle. "Alistair Vance, you're swimming with sharks, Nora." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm calling you." "Copy that, Captain," he said, his tone shifting to the professional one I knew so well. "Give me 48 hours. The next step was to consolidate my own intelligence. The rest of the day, I was a woman possessed by a singular focus. I turned my living room into a command center. I gathered every piece of communication, every digital breadcrumb, and began to build my arsenal. I opened a new, encrypted folder on my laptop. I labeled it simply, Operation Payback. Into this digital vault, I placed my evidence, one piece at a time. Exhibit A. A PDF of the bank statement showing the wire transfer of $65,000 to the wedding venue's account. A clean, undeniable transaction. Exhibit B. A complete log of my text messages with Caleb. His initial weak apologies, his pleading, his admission that the Vances were keeping the money as a contribution. Every word was a nail in his coffin. Exhibit C. A high-resolution screenshot of Serafina's Instagram post. Her smug smile, the pearl necklace gleaming against her skin, the hashtags, Nasir family heirloom, and blessed mocking me from the screen. Exhibit D. The ace up my sleeve. The recording of my final, explosive phone call with Caleb. Texas is a one-party consent state, which means as long as one person in the conversation, in this case, me, knows it's being recorded, it's perfectly legal. His panicked confession that he'd allowed Genevieve Vance to take the necklace because I was just a civil servant was my smoking gun. Listening to it again, my face remained impassive, but I could feel the ice forming in my veins. As I organized the files, I felt no satisfaction, only a grim sense of purpose. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about correction. It was about restoring a balance that had been violently disrupted. Mike called back in 36 hours, 12 hours ahead of schedule. "You're not going to believe this," he said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. "Alistair Vance is in the final stages of a hostile takeover of a Swiss luxury watch manufacturer. We're talking billions. And the company he's trying to acquire is old-school European. Their board of directors is composed of legacy families who are notoriously conservative." I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. "Go on." Their corporate charter has a moral turpitude clause. They pride themselves on family values and impeccable business ethics. They've backed out of deals for far less. Nora, a public scandal about his daughter and future son-in-law swindling a decorated army captain out of her life savings and stealing a family heirloom. It wouldn't just be bad press, it would be poison. It could kill the entire deal. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that has just spotted its prey's fatal weakness. I had found it, their Achilles heel. My battlefield wasn't going to be a courtroom with its endless delays and expensive lawyers. It was going to be a boardroom. "You're a lifesaver, Mike," I said. "Just be careful, Nora. These people don't play nice." "Neither do I replied, and hung up. I didn't call a lawyer. Lawyers were for defense. I was on offense. I opened a new email draft. I typed in the address for Alistair Vance's executive assistant, an address Mike had kindly provided. The subject line was concise and designed to bypass any spam filter and trigger immediate alarm. Subject: urgent matter regarding the public reputation of the Vance family. The body of the email was even shorter. I knew men like Alistair Vance didn't have time for long stories. They respected power and directness. "Mr. Vance, I require a private meeting with you within the next 24 hours to discuss the immediate repayment of a significant debt and the return of a stolen personal item. Failure to arrange this meeting will result in this matter becoming public. Captain Nora Watts, United States Army." I paused, my finger hovering over the send button. There was one final touch. I clicked the paperclip icon and attached a single file. It wasn't the bank statement. It wasn't the texts or the audio recording. The summons came less than an hour after I sent the email. A curt, professionally polite response from Alistair Vance's executive assistant confirmed a meeting for 2 p.m. the next day. A private jet was offered. I declined. I would meet him on my own terms, on my own time. I booked a commercial flight to Boston Logan International. I spent the flight not in preparation, but in quiet contemplation. I thought of a quote from Admiral Grace Hopper, a pioneer and a legend. "It's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to get permission." I wasn't going to ask for anything. I was going to inform. My strategy was unconventional, a direct strike instead of a prolonged legal siege. I was bypassing their army of lawyers and taking the fight straight to the king. The next day, I stood before a skyscraper of glass and steel that clawed at the Boston sky. Vance Financial occupied the top 5 floors. As I rode the silent, express elevator, I could feel the pressure change in my ears. I wasn't just ascending a building, I was ascending into a different world, a world of unimaginable wealth and power. I had chosen my attire with tactical precision. I wore my Army service uniform, the formal dress blues. The dark blue jacket was perfectly pressed, the gold buttons gleamed, and the ribbons on my chest, each one a silent testament to a chapter of my life lived in service, were perfectly aligned. It was more than a uniform. It was a symbol. It was everything they were not. The executive assistant, a woman with a practiced smile and nervous eyes, escorted me into a corner office that seemed larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the city and the harbor beyond. It was a view designed to intimidate, to remind any visitor of their own insignificance in the face of such power. Alistair Vance sat behind an immense mahogany desk that looked like it had been carved from a single, ancient tree. He was exactly as I had pictured, silver hair, an expensive suit, and the easy, arrogant posture of a man who had never been told no in his life. Next to him, in a slightly smaller chair, sat a man in a crisp suit who could only be his lawyer. Vance didn't stand. He gestured to a leather chair across from him. "Captain Watts, I have 15 minutes, he said, his voice a low, dismissive rumble. "What do you want?" I ignored the offered seat. I walked to the center of the room and stood at the position of parade rest, my feet shoulder-width apart, my hands clasped behind my back. It was a stance of respect, but also of unyielding readiness. "I'm here to reclaim property of the United States Army, sir," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying easily across the vast office. Alistair's eyebrow arched in amusement. Property? What property? The honor of one of its officers, I replied. And, as accessories to that, $65,000 and a pearl necklace. Alistair let out a short, humorless laugh. He glanced at his lawyer. My daughter tells me these were gifts. Now you've decided you want them back? That has a name, Captain. It's called extortion. The lawyer started to speak, but I cut him off. No, sir, I said, my gaze fixed on Alistair. Receiving a gift under the false pretense of an invitation that was later revoked is called fraud. And taking possession of a deceased person's heirloom against the owner's will is called theft. It's a desecration. I stepped forward, took the small black USB drive from my pocket, and placed it gently on the polished surface of his desk. It looked tiny and insignificant in the vast expanse of mahogany. This drive contains all the evidence: the bank transfers, the text messages, the Instagram post, and a legally obtained audio recording of your future son-in-law admitting to the arrangement. Alistair leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. He was still confident, still in control. My legal team will grind whatever you have on that stick into dust. It will be your word against ours, and I assure you, our word is worth considerably more. This was the moment, the decisive point of engagement. You still don't understand, Mr. Vance, I said, shaking my head slowly. I have no intention of taking you to court. The courts are too slow. My battlefield is far more efficient. I took a half step closer, forcing him to meet my eyes. I'm going to send a copy of this USB directly to the chairman of the board of the Swiss company you're trying to acquire. I did my research. His name is Colonel Jacques Renaud, Swiss Army Reserve. I wonder what a man like that, a fellow officer, will think of the family values of his future business partners when he hears how they treat a fellow soldier. The change was instantaneous and absolute. The smirk vanished from Alistair Vance's face. The casual arrogance evaporated, replaced by a flicker of raw, undisguised panic in his eyes. He had built his empire on a foundation of calculated risks, but he was staring at a risk he had never calculated. A lone army captain who had nothing to lose and was willing to burn his billion-dollar deal to the ground over a matter of principle. He shot a sharp, silencing glance at his lawyer, who had opened his mouth to object. The silence in the room was now heavy with Alistair's dawning realization that he had been completely and utterly outmaneuvered. He stared at me, no longer as a nuisance to be dismissed, but as a genuine threat to be neutralized. After a long, tense moment that stretched for an eternity, he spoke. His voice was different now, stripped of its condescending tone, replaced by the flat, pragmatic sound of negotiation. How much do you want? A cold, triumphant smile touched my lips. I don't want a single penny more than what is mine, I said, my voice low and precise. $65,000, the necklace, and an apology. I paused, letting the final condition land with its full weight. Not to me, to my mother. After the confrontation in Boston, the flight back to Texas was shrouded in a strange, quiet peace. The adrenaline of the battle had subsided, leaving behind a profound sense of exhaustion. I had won. I had faced the dragon in its lair and walked away with everything I had demanded. But victory felt less like a celebration and more like the quiet, somber aftermath of a necessary war. There were no parades, only the silent accounting of the cost. The first reparations arrived the very next day, delivered with the cold, impersonal efficiency of a corporate transaction. A uniformed courier from a high-end delivery service knocked on my door. He handed me a small, unassuming cardboard box, requested a signature on his tablet, and was gone without a word. There was no sender's name on the label, only a tracking number. I took the box inside and set it on my small kitchen table. For a moment, I just looked at it. It felt heavy, not with physical weight, but with the weight of everything it represented. I slit the packing tape with a knife. Inside, nestled in a bed of white tissue paper, was a simple, velvet jewelry box. I opened it. There they were, my mother's pearls, gleaming softly under the fluorescent light of my kitchen. They looked the same, but they felt different. Tainted. I closed the lid. There was no note, no card, no trace of a human touch. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an alert from my banking app. A wire transfer had been deposited into my savings account. The amount was $65,000. Exactly. To the penny. No apology, no phone call. The Vance family had fulfilled my terms as if settling a business invoice. For them, honor wasn't a principle. It was a liability to be managed. In a way, their coldness was a gift. A fake apology would have been a final, twisted insult. This soulless transaction was the truth, and it made what I had to do next that much clearer. The real aftershock came a few days later. I received a call from the front gate at Fort Hood. My brother was here to see me. I met him near the visitor center. The vast open space of the base, with its manicured lawns and sense of rigid order, was my world. Seeing him standing there, looking lost and out of place in his civilian clothes, was a stark reminder of how far apart our lives had drifted. He looked terrible. His face was gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. "The wedding's off," he said, the words tumbling out before I could even say hello. "Serafina left me. She said I failed to protect her family. From you." I listened without speaking, my arms crossed over my chest. He needed to say it all. Alistair was furious, Caleb continued, his voice cracking. Not because of what they did. He was furious because I underestimated you. He called it an unforced error, a needless risk to his business deal. He never once said he was sorry for what happened. And there it was, the final damning piece of evidence. Caleb still didn't get it. His pain wasn't born from the shame of his betrayal, but from the humiliation of his loss. He was mourning his canceled wedding, his lost connection to wealth and status, not the brother-sister bond he had shattered. Tears welled in his eyes. "Can we fix this, Nora?" he pleaded, taking a step toward me. "Please. Can we just go back? Back to how things used to be?" The way things used to be. The words hung in the dry Texas air between us. For a lifetime, the way things were meant me protecting him, me sacrificing for him, me being his unbreakable shield. I looked at the man before me, the boy I had raised by a campfire, the teenager whose dreams I had funded with my own sweat and pain. A wave of sorrow, deep and aching, washed over me. The love was still there, but it was tangled with the sharp, bitter reality of his choices. In that moment, I thought of the Serenity Prayer, a simple piece of wisdom I had often seen on posters in chapels and recovery rooms. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I could not change the Vances, and I finally accepted that I could not change Caleb. But I could change the terms of our relationship. I could change myself. "I forgive you, Caleb," I said, and my voice was softer than I expected, devoid of anger. "I forgive you for being weak and for making terrible choices." His face lit up with a desperate flicker of hope. "Then we can—" "But I can't go back to the way things were," I continued, gently but firmly. "That Nora, the one who would do anything to protect you, she's gone. You let them kill her. You chose your path, Caleb. You chose them over me, over Mom's memory. And now you have to walk that path. Alone." My calmness was not a weapon, it was a boundary. It was a wall built not of anger, but of acceptance. And it was more impenetrable than any fortress. He sobbed, a raw, broken sound that tore at my heart. But I didn't move to comfort him. Loving him now meant letting him feel the full consequences of his actions. Before he turned to leave, I held up a hand. "Wait." I went back to my car and retrieved the small jewelry box. I brought it back and held it out, not to him, but just between us. "I can't keep this anymore," I said, my voice steady. "Every time I look at it, I won't see Mom's love. I'll see their arrogance and your betrayal. And I don't want to give it to you." I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm sending it to Aunt Mary. She'll keep it safe. In her home, it will be cherished for what it is, not for what it's worth." It was the final act. I wasn't just relinquishing an heirloom, I was relinquishing a responsibility. The burden of being the keeper of our family's honor A legacy he had so carelessly tarnished was no longer mine to carry. In cutting him off, I was finally, truly, setting myself free. A year can change everything. It can be a quiet healer, a silent teacher. The raw, open wound of betrayal, once so consuming, had slowly, over the course of 4 seasons, transformed. It was no longer a source of pain, but a scar. A testament to a battle fought and won. A reminder of the strength I didn't know I had. The anger had faded, leaving behind the hard-won clarity of peace. The setting for this new chapter of my life wasn't a grand stage, but a small, humble community hall at Fort Hood, filled with soldiers and their families. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A year to the day after I'd walked out of Alistair Vance's office, I was standing on a small podium, looking out at the faces of my true family. Beside me, Sergeant Davis stood tall, his weathered face etched with an emotion he tried hard to contain. His dress uniform was immaculate, and in his hands, he nervously held a small commemorative plaque. I cleared my throat and leaned into the microphone. A year ago, I began, my voice steady. A sum of money that represented years of personal sacrifice became a symbol of a deep, personal betrayal. I could feel the room grow quiet, listeners leaning in. For a while, I didn't know what to do with it. It felt tainted, like a prize from a war I never wanted to fight. To keep it for myself felt wrong. To give it back felt like a surrender. I paused, looking over at Sergeant Davis, who gave me a small, encouraging nod. But then I realized, I continued, the value of a sacrifice isn't determined by how it's received, but by what you choose to do with its legacy. A soldier's sacrifice is never just for themselves. It's for the community. It's for the future. That's why today we are officially launching the Watts Davis Honor Scholarship, I announced. This $65,000, once a symbol of what was taken from me, will now be a symbol of what we can give back. It will no longer pay for a party built on lies. Instead, it will help build futures. It will support the children of our fellow soldiers, helping them pay for college, for books, for a chance at the dreams their parents fight to protect every single day. This money's no longer about settling a score from the past. It's about investing in the future of our Army family. A warm, heartfelt round of applause filled the room. I looked at Sergeant Davis, and I saw tears welling in his proud eyes. In that moment, the $65,000 was finally cleansed. It had been transformed from a debt of honor into a gift of hope. Life settled into a new rhythm, one of peace and purpose. A few months after the ceremony, a plain white envelope arrived in my on-base mailbox. There was no return address. My name and address were typed. Inside, there was no letter, only a cashier's check for $10,000 made out to the Watts Davis Honor Scholarship Fund. Tucked into the check was a small folded piece of notepaper. On it were 2 words, written in a familiar, slightly messy script. I'm sorry. It was from Caleb. My heart didn't race. There was no surge of anger or even a rush of forgiveness. There was only a quiet, somber acknowledgement. This was his way. Not with a phone call he couldn't make, not with words he couldn't say, but with an action. A quiet act of atonement. I didn't write back. I didn't call. I simply endorsed the check and deposited it into the fund's account. I was accepting his apology in the only way that now mattered, by allowing his act of remorse to contribute to something good. It was a bridge, not back to the way things were, but perhaps to a different, more honest future. The final piece of the past arrived in the most unexpected way. An email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was just my name. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. It was from Serafina. She wrote that after the engagement was called off, she had left Newport. She'd spent 6 months traveling, volunteering at a clinic in rural Costa Rica. For the first time in her life, she had been truly uncomfortable, truly insignificant, and truly useful. I lived in a world so small and shallow, I thought it was the whole ocean, she wrote. I didn't understand why Caleb was so terrified of his father, or so desperate to please mine. I didn't understand you at all. Now I do. He chose you that day in his father's office. At the time, I thought he chose to betray me. I realize now he chose his honor over my family's wealth. It was the one brave thing he did in our entire relationship. You taught both of us a lesson I was too arrogant to see. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that you changed my life. I read the email twice, then closed my laptop. It wasn't an absolution, and it wasn't an invitation to friendship. It was a confession. A quiet closing of a door. The Vances were no longer villains in my story. They were just people, flawed and broken in their own gilded cages, and I was free of them. I thought of a quote by Maya Angelou I'd recently read. I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. I had been changed, yes. But I had not been reduced. I had been forged. The story ends not in a mansion or a courtroom, but here, on the dusty training fields of Fort Hood, just before dawn. The sky over Texas is beginning to blush with the first hints of pink and orange. The air is cool and crisp. I stand before my platoon, my soldiers, their breath pluming in the pre-dawn chill. They are my family, the ones who live by the creed, I will never leave a fallen comrade. Ready? I call out, my voice cutting through the quiet. A chorus of "Hua" answers me. And we run. I lead the formation, my boots striking the earth in a steady, powerful rhythm, a cadence of strength and resilience. We are not running from the past. We are running toward the sunrise. I had fought the most important battle of my life, and I had won. Not by destroying my enemies, but by refusing to become them. I won by building a new legacy, my own dawn, forged in the fires of betrayal and built on the unshakable foundation of honor. Thank you for walking this path with me. My battle for honor is over, but I know that for many of you, your own fight for respect and self-worth continues every day. If this story resonated with you, if it gave you a piece of strength to carry into your own sunrise, then my mission is complete. This channel is dedicated to telling the stories of those who refuse to be broken. If you want to be a part of this community, please like this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories of resilience.